Hello, multi-mischievous midnight marauders, and thank you to Call of the Wild Man for providing the malt mention to Ralphie Review 906. Yep, and I have an interesting little bottle here to share with you, and it's called Glenlivet Single Malt Scotch Whisky, 12 years old, bottled at 48%, and if you've got very good eyesight, or ideally a steampunk or magnifying glass, or any magnifying glass will do, you can make out on the label in very poor writing that it's non-chill filtered. So, good stuff. Not quite sure why. Scratch my head a wee bit here. But a few of the big producers are now bringing out higher strength, unchill filtered whiskies. And I think it's a very good thing that they're doing so, because they are now providing more diversity of their range of product to suit people's palates. This, by the way, before we go any further, I've got to make a disclosure here. And I don't do this very often, but it's important that I do so. This was a bottle swap between myself and Roy Duff, the host at Akvavit and of the V-Pub, because the two of us have presented in this year, in 2021, the inaugural OSWAs, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. So you will find in the link down below in the description box a link to the official website where you can see the presentation awards video, and we're absolutely delighted that even at the point of recording this video here and now, we're approaching 30,000 views of that award ceremony. The Online Scotch Whisky Awards, go and find out for yourself. I'm not going to talk about it at the moment because I'm here to review this whisky. But at the end of it, Roy and I, as the hosts, sent each other a bottle of whisky. And he sent me, because we've been talking about it, he sent me this Glenlivet Illicit Still, which I believe was bought from Amazon. And we were discussing about the fact that people are fascinated to see how much of a difference in the experience there is between a standard presentation, generic presentation, which is filtered, chill filtered, and bottled at a lower strength, 40 or perhaps 43%, and something which is basically presented with a little more integrity. And I mean that objectively rather than disparagingly. I want you to keep that in context. So Roy sent me this bottle, the Glenlivet 12-year-old Illicit Still. Interestingly, if you buy my book, Stories from a Whisky Bar, one of the chapters, I believe it's chapter 8, is called The Year is 1824. And that was the year that Glenlivet Distillery was founded under license, legal license. And at that point, the landscape of Scotch whisky changed considerably. Very difficult times in Scotland. A lot of social change and disruption was taking place. And where you find human activity, the drama of human activity, you will usually find that there's some liquor accompanying it, whether it be rum rebellions or whisky warfare out on the moors and the glens. It certainly took place, and when this distillery was originally founded and producing very good whisky, I have to add, from the historical references that I have access to, the proprietor always carried 2 pistols loaded at all times to protect himself from the anger and the wrath of the illicit distillers who realised that they were struggling to compete with the new generation of entrepreneurs. We'll leave it at that. Part of the legacy with Glenlivet, it's always had an interesting reputation, particularly amongst independent bottlers. And in fact, Cadenhead I don't know if they're still doing it, but in fact that they would name some of the whiskies Glenlivet, Glenelgin, for example. It's just off the top of my head. They would attach the Glenlivet name to other single malts as a general point of reference as to the quality that you should expect. Because there was always this historic association of quality. Nowadays, Glenlivet brand is owned by Pernod Ricard, and it's generally presented to the market as a consumer product. And that's absolutely fine, because, to be honest, a 12-year-old standard Glenlivet is a really good place to start in your whisky journey, because it's unpeated, it's accessible, and it's a pleasantly fresh fruit single malt. But with the illicit still here, you have the appearance of a very close version. I have to say, in my opinion, the flavour profile is very close to the standard Glenlivet. But this is just, they've loosened up the corporate control a little bit by bottling at 48%. It's got an age statement, and if you look really, 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 really closely, I'm going to bring this right up. I hope it comes into view. Just there. It's out of view. It's gone out of view again. Uh-oh. I tell you what, cameras, this is an expensive camera I'm using. And to be honest, see the wee cheapie that I started with 10 years ago? It had better focusing ability. Canon, you should be ashamed of yourself. Back to the review. There it says, non-chill filtered. A really interesting whisky. If you want to make straight comparisons, buy a bottle of the standard 12-year-old, buy a bottle of the illicit still, and literally put them side by side. You, malt mates, will learn so much from the experience. On the nose, fresh fruit. Raisiny sultanas. It's a combination of raisin sultanas. It's got a quite slightly rich, sweet note to it. Mild toffee and soft vanillas. It's an aromatic whisky, and I'm getting a certain spiciness, a fresh fruit wood spiciness in the background, but asserting itself quite convincingly over the fresh fruit. So there's quite a lot of activity going on here. I'm also noticing that there's an astringency to it. You'll get, with experience, you'll notice on the nose what you might be getting of sensation-wise from the flavour. So when I come to taste it, ooh, sour, intense, lively, fresh, wonderfully fresh whisky, very clean in the palate, good range of flavour. It's, what would I describe it? Don't get this out of context, particularly if you're going to the gym using you're a bodybuilder. It's like the standard Glenlivet 12-year-old in steroids. It's just juiced up because of the additional alcoholic strength. And what you're also noticing immediately is that range of flavour. The delivery of it has got a clarity to it as a result of the fact that it's not been chill filtered and using a standard procedure. It has been filtered. It's been significantly filtered, but I don't think it's been chill filtered. So they could just basically barrier filter it, would make it even better. But hey, I'm not going to get pedantic about it. This is a good single malt whisky. Thank you, Roy. I mean, the reason that I mentioned that Roy and I had a bottle swap is because I didn't buy this whisky. And I set my reputation on the fact that I review what I buy. But I'm giving you the context and the reason for why I'm reviewing this, because I just like to do so for my own peace of mind. So I'm going to add some water to this. And I can tell you right now, because I've been doing a bit of practice over the last few weeks, full teaspoonful of water, that's a full 5 millilitres. That'll do for starters. Gentle roly roly, no shaky shakies, no. Literally as soon as you put your nose back into the glass having added water, you see that brightness sort of expanding, fresh fruit notes expanding, it's becoming even more zesty, but there's a kind of softer, sweeter part of the whiskey starting to come through as well. So it's literally changing flavour shape in the glass from that addition of a small amount of water. Wonderful fresh fruit notes. Apple, pears, apple and pears. Soft raisin, soft sultana, little bit of toffiness, fruit toffee note, and spiciness all mixed in there. Then the sensations start to become more astringent. That astringency that I mentioned earlier is coming from the presence of the sensation of bitter and sour. Without water, you'll get more of the sour note of the sensation. Once you've added water, within a few minutes, you're going to get much more of an intense bitter note of a sensation. And that is going to be a problem for some folk, particularly if you don't have as much experience. Say about 3 or 4 years experience, you're going to be slightly put off by that. And I'm here to let you know from the bothy, don't you worry about a thing. All this needs is a bit more time. Instead of 1 minute in the glass for each year in the cask, so that's 12 years in the cask, I would give it 15 to 20 minutes. It just takes that little bit longer. But malt mates, I can assure you it is well worth the wait. This is an exciting bottling of Glenlivet, when in fact your younger versions tend to be sort of generic and people quickly move on from them. So it's wonderful to come back to a whiskey which is represented for a more mature palate market. And you'll see more of this happening, and they're doing it for a reason, malt mates. The reason's simple. It sells whiskey. Simple as that. It sells whiskey. Gets whiskey noticed. Gets the whiskey talked about. Because there's more of an integrity presentation to the customer. When I come back to smelling this whiskey, settling down in the nose. In fact, there's a little hint of smoke in the background which you're not quite expecting. So it's a nice little extra angle on the 12-year-old that you don't notice in the standard bottling. To the taste, and by the way, you will see a little bit of Scotch mist appearing now. There we go. Not super hazy, but it's starting to appear. Just give it time. That's very good. A lot of fresh bourbon casks going on there. Generic casks, but they're doing a good job. That bitterness will start to settle. A sweetness will come in from behind over 5 to 10 minutes, and give it time. And it will start to just enrich the whole experience. It's I recommend you give this the time it needs so that you get the best bliss experience from this single malt. Malt marks. Well, one more taste before the malt mark. The bitterness can come across as a little bit harsh. However, it does subside. Distinctly subside. At which point you're getting to the finest heart of the experience. The moment where you say, I've tasted this whiskey a few times. Here we are, 20 minutes in, and this is the best taste yet of the experience from the glass. If there's one thing I would criticise about it, it's slightly over distilled. If they'd pushed a little bit more into the faints, they'd have got a little extra richness of flavour and sensation to add to what is a relatively straightforward single malt whisky. It's very contemporary, very modern, but certainly big thanks to Roy for sending me this bottle. I've found a Glenlivet, an affordable Glenlivet, which I've frankly really enjoying. Now, malt marks, because I want to let you get back to your drams, you know, folks. I'm going to give this a very reasonable and realistic 86 out of 100, and it is a near integrity malt mark. I have to say, I'm pretty sure it's natural colour, but I'm not seeing anything that says natural colour in the label, so I can't presume. I think just going 100% with an integrity bottling is the next step for Glenlivet. I think it will be very well received, and single casks, young single cask Glenlivets will also be very, very well received, and I think we'll see some of that in the future. Just a prediction. I'm Ralphie. Thank you for joining me for this review of a very pleasant, Ralphie recommended Glenlivet 12-year-old illicit still, higher strength, 48%, unchill filtered single malt, benefiting from that the delivery. And if you pop back again for Ralphie Review 906 Extras, I shall be introducing 3 peated single malt whiskies that I enjoyed so much this year, I went out and bought another bottle. What are they going to be? Well, experienced malt mates, you're probably guessing already. However, all will be revealed in my forthcoming next Ralphie Review 906 Extras. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting, educating and informative and illustrative, because my purpose is simply to share the journey. I'm not an expert, I am not an authority, none of that. I'm just a bunnety, friendly old anorak. Well, I'm a miserable git really, but hey, you know, nobody's perfect. But I just sit here in the old stone bothy, and I have to say, very soon I'll be putting the fire on. I've got the electric bar heater on to make it look a bit warmer and sunnier than it actually is. But I'll be putting on the coal fire soon, because the winter chills are arriving, which is always a good time for a single malt, is it not?